stopped worshiping idols by the time of the New Testament. Many of the Jews would not even pass through Samaria when going from Galilee to Judea. They would cross over the Jordan River and go down the east side of the river and cross back over around Jericho, adding many miles to an 80-mile trip. So Jews and Samaritans avoided any kind of contact with each other. And so Jesus said that the two greatest commandments are, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. So a Jewish lawyer asked Jesus the question, who is my neighbor? So Jesus told the parable of the Good Samaritan to answer this question. So what happened to the man on the road to Jericho? Beaten. He was beaten, robbed and beaten. Jesus told of a man who went down from Jerusalem to Jericho. This road descends about 3,500 feet and is about 18 miles long. It passed through isolated mountains with holes, caves, and hiding places for robbers. This road was called the Bloody Way because so many people were robbed and killed on this road. So sure enough, the man in Jesus' parable, fell among thieves and was stripped him of his clothing and wounded him and departed and left him half dead. I was telling Paul Sunday and I kind of picture an old Western where you've got these trails coming down mountains, rocky trails, hills, the dirt road, and maybe like Clint Eastwood passing by and seeing someone helping them or passing by. I just kind of picture a Western, the scenery, the rock and the hills. All right, who passed by first? The priest and Levite. All right, the man was lying along the road, badly beaten and wounded. When a priest came down that road, the priest belonged to the tribe of Levi. If you remember, the tribe of Levi, set apart for service to God, offered the animal sacrifices, studied the Jewish law, and taught the law to the people. This priest was one of the Levites who offered the animal sacrifices, and he would know the two greatest commandments. But when the priest saw the wounded man, he passed on the other side. Then, who was next? Who came by next? The Levite. This Levite belonged to the tribe of Levi, so he also knows the two great commandments. But this Levite looked at the wounded man and he passed on the other side. I think we talked about it Sunday morning about, nowadays if we were to see someone like that clothed, we might kind of judge them where they might be from or how they lived, or if he could speak, saying help me or something, you might think, well, he's from the north, that's a northern accent, or deep south, but this man was stripped and he didn't speak, so it's just odd that they kept walking by being who they are. So were they showing any love toward this man? No. Would they want to be left lying there, or would they want someone to help them if they come along? Who was the man's neighbor? Samaritan. We just read Luke 10, verses 33 and 34. Then Jesus said that a certain Samaritan came where he was, and and when he saw him, he had compassion. Now, if anybody had an excuse to leave the wounded man alone, it was the Samaritan. The Samaritan knew that the wounded man was a Jew. The Jews and the Samaritans were enemies. They had nothing to do with each other. Otherwise, nationality would not have been mentioned. Of all the men in the world to do a neighborly act, a Jew would never expect the Samaritan to do anything for him. Which of the three men was doing the will of God? The Samaritan that the Jews hated. So what is Jesus telling us here? Obeying God is what matters, not whether you're a Jew or a Samaritan. How did the Samaritan help him? Yep. Yep. He poured oil and wine on him, bandaged him, took him to an inn, paid for his care. So using olive oil and wine was a common remedy back then for cuts and wounds. And travelers usually carried them just like we might carry some Neosporin in a purse or a backpack or something for hiking. Band-Aids. The alcohol in the wine would kill some of the bacteria and clean out the wound, and the olive oil would ease the pain. Sometimes Jews would mix olive oil and wine together and carry it around to use on wounds. Then the Samaritan bandaged the injured man, his wounds. He set him on his donkey and brought him to an inn and took care of him. That means that the Samaritan was up during the night taking care of his wounded Jewish man. In the morning, the Samaritan left money with the innkeeper to pay for the care of the wounded man. And the Samaritan told the innkeeper, "Whatever more you spend, when I come again, I will repay you." Verse 35. Then Jesus asked the Jewish lawyer, "So which of these three do you think was neighbor to him who fell among the thieves?" And the lawyer answered, "He who showed mercy on him." Notice that the Jewish lawyer wouldn't even say the word Samaritan. Then Jesus said to the lawyer, "Go and do likewise." To love our neighbor, we must what? Show mercy like the Samaritan did. Showing mercy simply means being kind to others. Treat other people like you would want to be treated. If a new kid shows up at a church or at school or in the neighborhood, be friendly to him or her. It's hard when you move to a new place and start a new school or church because you don't know anybody. And don't get into groups and not allow anyone else to join and not allow anyone else to join your group. That's unkind. What is the meaning of the parable of the Good Samaritan? Yep. Shows duty to our neighbor and shows who our neighbor is. Our duty is love your neighbor as yourself. And who is my neighbor? Yep. Excuse me. Anyone for whom Christ died. All men, all of us. The Samaritan didn't stop to think that the wounded man was a Jew who hated him because he was a Samaritan. All that the Samaritan saw was somebody who needed help. And Jesus wants us to be the same way. Remember, if you help people and are kind to them, those people can see that being a Christian makes you special, a special person. Then they might want to come to church with you and have Bible study.
When we're going over this, a thought came to me about the Jews are making, and they always do, that we're of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We have the law, we have the Ten Commandments. And when you read the Ten Commandments, half of them is the relationship that man has with God, and the other half of them is the relationship that man has with man. And this, was also in Deuteronomy, love the Lord thy God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength. And Abraham itself is kind of a quick summary of the Ten Commandments. It's showing our commitment and our obligation to God, and to love Him with all that we have, our mind, our soul, and study, and try to comprehend those things that God wants us to do, and do them to please God. But then it also deals with our relationship with man, and love thy neighbor as thyself. If you love yourself, which we all will, then in that case, you know how to treat your neighbor because you know how you want to be treated.
Right.
So it's kind of a quick version of the Ten Commandments, and they always are posted up. We have the Ten Commandments, and we have the law, and that's gonna go on all the way through even Christ's ministry in the New Testament. That's their thing. Won't keep holding to that because they're a chosen people. Well, act like it.
Yeah.
Do it.
Has anyone, I guess, to say, gone out of their way to help someone? I'll just say, I think it was last year, Kim got a call from somebody that this lady, her house burned or something, and she needed a place to stay this one night. So we met her over at the hotel over here, Ashley Inn, I think is that what it's called? And got a room for her for that night to, help her out. So what does this teach us? Compassion has no boundaries. Love is not constrained by race, religion, or a social status. The Samaritan crossed every culture barrier to help a suffering man. Love that stops to ask, is this person like me? It's not the love Christ calls us to. It's not the love Christ calls us to. Proximity doesn't make someone your neighbor. Compassion does. In other words, Billy Wayne's closest to me right now. He's my neighbor, but all of y'all are my neighbor. Everybody, not just the neighbor down the road or across the street. I think we discussed that Sunday morning. The priest and Levite were close in distance, but far in mercy. The Samaritan, through social distance, drew near with love. Being a neighbor is not about geography, but about engagement. Real love cost something. The Samaritan gave time, effort, oil, and wine, his own resources, money, and even a promise to return. Loving others will often be inconvenient, expensive, and risky, but it's always worth it. Being a neighbor reflects God's heart. Jesus concludes with the question, which of these three did you think was a neighbor? And the lawyer replies, the one who showed mercy. And Jesus says, go and do likewise. So the command is not go and feel compassion, but go and do likewise. So now a workbook, we'll get into our workbook. Hey, yeah.
I thought it was interesting that, the Jews were going on the east side of Jordan to keep from even going through Samaria. But yet it just so happened that these people crossed paths, and thankfully the Samaritans didn't feel that same way towards this Jew. And so here they were going out of their way to not be around the Samaritans, and thankfully he got picked up by one. I bet he didn't. The one who was injured, I bet he didn't feel the same way about the Samaritans that he did beforehand. After he got taken care of by one.
Any comments, or anybody would like to add anything? Okay, so this is lesson 6, who is my neighbor. On the occasion of Jesus' telling the parable of the Good Samaritan, a certain what? Excuse me. Lawyer was testing Jesus. Luke 10:25. In New Testament times, the designation lawyer referred to what? One learned in the law of Moses, or an official interpreter. So in a note here it says lawyer, the name given to one learned in the law of Moses, but written in oral, of which he was the official interpreter. The term is used synonymously with teacher of the law and with scribe. What question did the lawyer ask Jesus in verse 25?
What shall I do to inherit eternal life?
Yep. What shall I do to inherit eternal life? Jesus prompted the man to answer his own question. The two-part answer, as stated by the man, was, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, with all your strength, and with all your mind. And your neighbor as yourself. The lawyer's attempt at self-justification moved him to ask what follow-up question? Who is my neighbor? Oh. Now the Good Samaritan, the parable. The traveler in the parable was journeying from where to where? Jerusalem to Jericho. The route was known as because what? Way of the blood.
Thieves and death row usually in their first.
Yeah, but the terrain, yeah. It was rugged, rocky, desolate pass, making travelers an easy target for thieves. I guess they would hide behind rocks and boulders and maybe a cave. What happened to the man on the road to Jericho? Robbed and beaten. And who passed by? Priest and Levite. Upon observing the wounded traveler, what did the priest and Levite do? We just answered it. Passed by on the other side. Of those who had opportunity, why was the Samaritan the least likely to help? Jews had no dealings with Samaritans, so a Samaritan would be less likely to assist. And who was the man's neighbor? Samaritan. To love our neighbor, wait. How did the Samaritan help him? Poured wine, oil and wine on him, and bandaged him, and took him to an inn, took care of him. To love our neighbor, we must show mercy. Verse 37. Meaning, what is the meaning of the parable of the Good Samaritan? A and B. Yeah. Show duty to our neighbor and who our neighbor is. And who is my neighbor? Anyone for whom Christ died, all men. Yeah, that's all. Any questions, comments, anything? I think it was, wasn't it? A denarius, 1 day's work?
I think that they went to the vineyard and worked
Yeah.
one minute, what they agreed to, but that's, I don't know if that's a set thing, but it was in that case.
I would say yeah. All right. So we'll start from the beginning on the mustard seed. Go over everything that we've learned. I gave the answer. What's the smallest seed? Mustard seed. Then the mustard seed becomes a tree. How is the church like a mustard seed? Starts out small at first, and then grows large. And what makes bread rise? Leaven. how the church is like leaven.
Grows and fills the earth.
Grows and fills the earth. Church grows, yep. What was found in a field? Hidden treasure. What was the cost of the field?
All that he had.
All that he had. And how the church is like a treasure. Worth all that we have. And the man was seeking
Pearl of great price.
pearl of great price. What was the cost of the pearl? All that he had. And how the church is like the pearl. Worth all that we have. What is a husbandman? Man. What are husbandmen?
Farmer of grapes.
Farmer of grapes. And who was left in charge of the vineyard? Husbandman. What the husbandman did to the servants? Beat some, stoned, killed some. And who did the owner send last? His son. What husbandman did to the son? He killed him. What was the punishment of the husbandman? Destruction. What was the meaning of the parable of the husbandman? Kingdom was taken from some and given to others. What were some excuses given by those first invited? This was the great feast. Is that what the great supper? Bought a field, bought 10 oxen, and married a wife. And who was invited later? All men. What is the meaning of the parable of the Great Supper? Only those who come when invited will be in the kingdom. What the rich man loved, his riches. What did the rich man plan to do? Build bigger barns, stores riches. And then, so what happened to the rich man? He died. What did God call the rich man? Fool. All who lay up earthly treasures are fools. How often to forgive? 70 times 7. The church is like a king who forgave his servant. And the amount the servant was forgiven, yeah, 10,000 talents, or millions of dollars. To pay debt if not forgiven. Man, wife, children, sold to slavery. Amount servant refused to forgive. £100, which equals around $17. Unforgiving servant cast. Fellow servant into prison. Punishment of the unforgiving servant. Delivered to tormentors till he paid his debt. What's the meaning of the parable of the unforgiving servant? God forgives only if we forgive others. And on to tonight's. What happened to the man on the road to Jericho? Robbed and beaten. And who passed by? Priest and Levite. Just kept on going. But who was the man's neighbor? Samaritan. And how did the Samaritan help him? Oil, wine, poured on him, bandaged, took him to an inn, paid for his care. Made a promise he'd come back. To love our neighbor, we must show mercy like the Samaritan did. And the meaning of the parable of the Good Samaritan? Shows duty to our neighbor and shows who our neighbor is. And who is my neighbor? All men, yep. Anyone for whom Christ died. Very good. Comments?
Card number 20, the answer is the kingdom is taken from the Jews and given to all men. But it really wasn't taken from the Jews, because they give it to all men. Jews are part of all men. It didn't restrict it just to the Jews. It included everybody, but they weren't always concentrated on the Jews in that sense. Kind of what we refer to as an oxymoron. It's right, but it's wrong. Saying two things if they seem like they contradict each other. Taking from some and giving to all. That doesn't sound how you want to. That's what I thought about when I read it the first time, because I'm sure there were some Jews that were trying to follow the law the way they were supposed to. And then, but in this case, I would think that would have it'd be taken from them, even though they're trying to do what's right, it would include them and the Jews too, have the same opportunity as the Jews. Okay. Mess you up on thinking about that, but just reading it almost sounds like the Jews have no hope at all. It's taken from them.
Yeah.
It's rewarded at all. But in essence, it's saying that you're not going to be the only one. It's going to be the all. So the Jew part, you just leave it all, because it's not going to make any difference. All men will be entitled to it.
right, thank you for your input and comments. Lord willing, next week, wise and the foolish builders. Wise man built his house upon what? A rock. Y'all remember the song? I'm not going to sing it. Don't worry. Paul might sing it Sunday morning. I don't know. Foolish man built his house upon what? Who is the wise man? One who knows and does God's will. And who's the foolish man? He knows God and does not do God's will. And then the good shepherd.